Hash the voice that crossed an ocean. The sun was setting over Manila Bay, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In a small apartment on the edge of Cebu City, a young man named Marco stood by his window, watching the last light of day fade into evening. He was 22 years old with kind eyes and calloused fingers from years of working at his uncle's repair shop. Marco had always loved music. Ever since he was a small boy, he would listen to his grandmother's old records, losing himself in the voices of legends like Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra. His grandmother would sit in her rocking chair, eyes closed, humming along. She always told him that music was a gift, something that could carry a person across any distance, over any obstacle. Now his grandmother was gone, but her record player remained. Every evening after work, Marco would come home, his hands stained with grease and oil, and he would sing. He sang to the empty room, to the fading photographs on the wall, to the memory of the woman who had believed in him when no one else did. His mother worried about him. She worked long hours at the local hospital, and she wanted Marco to focus on practical things, a stable job, a good future. She loved him deeply, but she did not understand why he spent so much time with those old songs, why he practiced scales in the bathroom, why he recorded himself singing into his phone late at night. Marco, she would say gently, setting down his dinner plate, music is beautiful, but it cannot feed a family. Marco would nod and smile, but inside his heart ached with a dream he could barely put into words. He wanted to sing, not just for himself, but for the world. He wanted to honor his grandmother's memory to prove that her faith in him had not been misplaced. But how could a boy from Cebu working in a repair shop ever find such a stage? The answer came on a humid Tuesday afternoon. Marco's cousin Elena burst into the repair shop, her phone held high, her face flushed with excitement. "Marco, Marco, you have to see this," she shouted, nearly tripping over a stack of tires. She showed him a video of a singing competition, a famous show from America called America's Got Talent. People from all over the world could audition. Singers, dancers, magicians, anyone with a dream and the courage to chase it. "You should try," Elena said, her eyes bright with hope. "You have the voice, Marco. Everyone knows it." Marco stared at the screen, watching a young woman take the stage, her voice soaring through the auditorium. The judges sat at their table listening, evaluating, deciding fates with the press of a button. One of them was Simon Cowell, the man known for his sharp words and even sharper judgment. Fear crept into Marco's chest like cold water. What if he failed? What if he embarrassed himself, his family, his grandmother's memory? What if his voice, which sounded so good in his small apartment, was nothing special at all? But that night, as he stood by his window again, watching the stars appear one by one over the city, he thought of his grandmother. He thought of her hands worn from a lifetime of work, gently placing a record on the turntable. He thought of her smile when he sang for her, the way her eyes would light up as if she were seeing something miraculous. "Music can carry you anywhere," she had told him once. "But first, you must be brave enough to let it." Marco took a deep breath. He picked up his phone and began filling out the audition form. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation and doubt. Marco practiced every spare moment he had. He sang in the shop, much to his uncle's amusement. He sang on his way home, drawing curious looks from strangers. He sang until the notes felt like old friends, familiar and true. His mother found out about the audition by accident. She saw the confirmation email on his phone one morning while he was in the shower. When he came out, she was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. "America," she said quietly. "You are going to America." Marco sat down across from her. He explained everything. The audition, the dream, the promise he had made to himself and to his grandmother's memory. His mother listened without interrupting, her eyes growing wet with tears. She tried to hide. Finally, she reached across the table and took his hand. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she whispered. "I am proud, too. I am sorry I did not see it before." They held each other then, and Marco felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had not known he was carrying. The flight to America was the longest journey of Marco's life. He had never been on a plane before, never left the Philippines. Everything felt strange and enormous. The airports, the crowds, the endless sky outside his window. He clutched his backpack to his chest. Inside it, a single photograph of his grandmother and a small cross she had given him years ago. When he finally arrived at the venue for America's Got Talent, his heart was pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. The building was massive, gleaming with lights and energy. Everywhere he looked, there were people with dreams just like his. Dancers stretching, singers warming up their voices, magicians practicing sleight of hand. A producer with a clipboard called his name. "Marco Santos, you're up next." The walk to the stage felt like walking through a dream. He could hear the audience beyond the curtain, an ocean of voices and anticipation. He thought of turning back, of running all the way home to Cebu, to the safety of his small apartment and his grandmother's records. But then he heard it, a voice in his memory, clear as a bell. His grandmother singing along to one of Elvis's songs. Her voice cracked but joyful. "Don't be afraid, Anik," she seemed to say. "Let the music carry you." Marco stepped onto the stage. The lights were blinding. The audience stretched out before him like a vast living thing. And there at the judges' table sat Simon Cowell, his expression neutral, his arms crossed. "Hello," Simon said, his British accent crisp and clear. "What's your name and where are you from?" "My name is Marco Santos," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I am from Cebu City in the Philippines. And what will you be doing for us today?" Marco swallowed hard. "I will be singing for my grandmother who taught me to love music. She passed away last year, and I want to honor her memory." Simon nodded slowly. "All right, Marco. The stage is yours." The music began. It was an Elvis song, one of his grandmother's favorites, "Can't Help Falling in Love." Marco closed his eyes and let the first note rise from somewhere deep inside him, a place he had never quite reached before. And then something extraordinary happened. The fear melted away. The enormous stage, the bright lights, the watching eyes, all of it faded until there was only the music. Marco sang the way he had always sung in his apartment with his whole heart, with every ounce of love and loss and hope he carried inside him. His voice filled the auditorium, rich and smooth, with a warmth that seemed to wrap around every person in the room. It was not perfect. There were small imperfections, the slight roughness of genuine emotion, but it was real. It was honest. It was beautiful. When the last note faded into silence, Marco opened his eyes. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then the audience erupted. They rose too. Their feet clapping and cheering, their voices joining together in a roar of approval. Marco stood frozen, unable to believe what he was seeing. He looked at the judges' table. One by one, they were standing too, and then he saw Simon Cowell, the man known for his impossible standards, rising slowly from his chair, his face transformed by a genuine smile. "Marco," Simon said, his voice cutting through the noise. The audience quieted, waiting. "That was exceptional. Your grandmother would be incredibly proud of you. Even Elvis would be proud of that performance." Tears streamed down Marco's face. He tried to speak, but could not find the words. The other judges pressed their buttons, each one a yes, each one a door opening to a future he had only dared to imagine. Months later, after the competition ended, Marco returned to Cebu. He had not won the grand prize, but something far more valuable had happened. The world had heard his voice. His mother had seen him on television, calling him in tears of joy. His uncle had closed the shop for the day so everyone could watch. And one evening, as the sun set over Manila Bay once more, Marco stood by his window in his small apartment. He placed one of his grandmother's old records on the turntable, Elvis. Naturally, as the music played, he sang along softly, his voice mixing with the crackling sound of vinyl. He thought about his journey, about the fear he had overcome, about the moment he stood on that enormous stage and let his heart pour out in song. He thought about Simon Cowell's words, about the standing ovation, about the way music had indeed carried him across an ocean, just as his grandmother had always promised. Outside, the stars were beginning to appear one by one like small lights guiding the way home. Marco smiled, placed his hand over his heart, and whispered a quiet thank you to the woman who had given him wings. The record played on, Elvis's voice mixing with his own, and in that small apartment in Cebu City, the music felt like magic. It felt like love. It felt like home.